Hey everyone, what's up? Big Jason. I'm filling in for Mike Lance today. He is in Alaska on vacation with his family. So today is very special. Today we have the son of the greatest copywriter who ever lived, Gary Halbert. Bond, how's it going? Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Actually, very proud to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about the three ways that Bond's dad, Gary, would turn the Warrior Forum into his personal ATM and how you can do it as well. So we're going to be discussing this, and the whole time you can be asking questions. So in the chat box, there's a little tick or a check mark where if you have a question, check that before you hit enter, and that'll let us know that it's a question. If it's just a comment, just type it in, hit enter, all good. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you are in the world. We want to see where you're from.
Okay. My name's Bond Halbert. I am actually named after James Bond. A lot of people wonder that.
That's true.
And my father was a big James Bond nut. I am in Los Angeles, California. We moved here.
I'm in Paris.
Yes, we are very international.
And I have a baguette as well.
My brother Kevin should be floating around the audience too, so you'll have two Halbert sons here.
Nice. Ralph Charlton might be here too.
Oh, really? Love Ralph.
Yeah.
He's absolutely great. But Kevin and I, we run the GaryHalbertLetter.com. We were breaking out on our own and doing our own info marketing and a lot of stuff while our father was still alive. But when he passed, there was a void there. We wanted to help cement his legacy. So we're more well known for actually keeping the letter alive, and we actually increased its response and subscribership greatly. And that wasn't hard to do with the incredible amount of content and the quality of the content our father left. Yep. So, but we took that over, and then now we do a lot of consulting. We teach people how to do, copywriting and general marketing techniques. We're very primarily focused in direct response, though.
Yep.
So.
And guys, Bond is one of the most in-demand mastermind guest speakers that I've ever known. If it's in California or thereabouts, he's getting invited, from John Carlton to a lot of top guys in all kinds of different niches. The apple definitely did not fall far from the tree. How old were you, Bond, when your dad took you to your first mastermind meeting or business meeting?
I'm trying. It's hard for me to pinpoint the date. If it weren't for the boron letters, I wouldn't know.
Were you in junior high?
It was younger than that. I think I was around 10 years old when I was walking down the street with my dad, and I said, I'm really lucky. And he said, why? And my dad went on up and down rides all the time. He was addicted to making money, but he couldn't have as much fun unless he needed to make that money. So he'd blow all of his money and then make it again. And so I said to him, I'm really lucky. In fact, he wrote about it in the boron letters.
Yep.
And he said, why? I said, well, my oldest brother, Jeff, he just got to live with all the toys and all that. I get to see how you make the money. And he just thought that was the most brilliant thing, and immediately started taking me around to meetings, having me read ads and gauge their response and how they were going to be doing, teaching me about list brokers and cards. Right. And recency and all of the other good stuff. So I've been studying, and by the time I got to college, I knew more than all my professors did in real life, actual business. Right. But nobody, you couldn't sit around when you're 18 and tell them that you had 10 years of that experience. Nobody believed you.
Right.
That's why one of the reasons I love the boron letters so much.
Awesome. So let's get to it, guys. Again, ask as many questions as you want. We're going to go through the three ways Gary Halbert would turn the Warrior Forum into his personal ATM, and how you can too. And if you have a question versus a comment, there's a little checkbox. Mark it that it is a question to let us know. And let's get started, Bond.
Okay, great. The first thing we're going to talk about, and I love the angle and everything that Jason was like, this is what I think we should do, and talk about what they should know. And it started to just fill in the pieces right away. And I think you guys are going to like what I've got to talk about. The first thing that my dad would do if he was trying to make the Warrior Forum his ATM is he would do research. And in this particular case, I can tell you what he would do. Depending on what the market is, you want to do everything from walking in your prospect's shoes to sitting down and talking to them, getting to know them, selling them stuff, getting them feedback and all that. Our father's greatest piece he ever did was actually a coat of arms promotion. And to perfect his copy, he actually would go door to door and sell people and give them his pitch. And so he could see them, their look in their eyes and when they would get excited and whatnot. So in this particular one, since it's an online forum in the venue, I can tell you exactly what he would do. The first thing he would do is seek out the advice of a top expert on the Warrior Forum to pick their brain. And he would pay for that advice, and he would buy material to study it and so forth. In this case, and it's not because we're on a show, I think he would seek out Mike Lance, to be honest with you, because he sees, it's the same thing that I was always interested in when we became friends, which is with Big Jason, is because he and I like test result numbers, and we like people who mail often and mail a lot. They don't just have one winner. They've got, they've done several winners and several promotions and experimented. Yep. They find out what works and what doesn't. So that's a fast track way to get a lot of good information. But the second thing he would do is go down and get into the trenches, and he would go and find the comments with the most activity, because he always taught us to look for passion, look for energy where it's being spent. If you can, find an irrational passion for things. That's why he liked things like golf, because these guys would spend thousands of dollars to take a stroke off their game. So in the Warrior Forum, what you'd be looking at is the most popular and commented on threads, the ones that have the most views, the ones that have the most comments. And he would start to get a feel for what the Warrior Forum was about and what it is the Warriors needed. And I sort of already did that. If you go on the Warrior Forum, the only post that I've ever posted on the Warrior Forum, at least that I know of, was I actually posted, I went in there and I said, hey, I'd like to know what letters our father wrote that you thought were the most impactful on your life. And I got a lot of great responses, and that told me the difference between letters I liked or I preferred through my bias, and letting it prove to me which of the ones that were the most effective to more seasoned warriors on the forum. And that was actually a bit of market research. Now, I could have done a little bit more with that post and tried to make it a little bit of PR and a little bit of buzz, but that one was actually just pure market research and finding out what they really wanted and what they could use. And it worked. But what he would do is he would say that again.
Sorry. When you get a chance, I have a follow-up question about what you were saying about your dad would look for as far as the passion.
Well, what he's going to look for, he's going to look for people.
I have an actual follow-up question that I'll ask, but I'll ask. Let me know when it's a good time.
Okay, we'll do it right when I'm talking about the research. So he would note the language. If you had any kind of specific language that became technical, he would note that down. So WSO would be one of those. And the way that he would use those, by the way, this is a copywriting tip or trick. He would, when he wants to prove that he's an authority and he's somebody that somebody in the Warrior Forum should pay attention to and knows what they're doing, he would drop the technical terms that only warriors would know was technical. But he would also spell it out. So you'll see some people making the mistake and say, hey, this is a WSO. And they don't explain to people who just got on the Warrior Forum that means Warrior Forum special offer or a special offer just for the Warrior Forum. Our father would use that in his copy and then spell it out so that you did two things. One, you knew he knew what he was talking about. And if you knew the term, you did. And if you didn't know the term, you knew he knew what he was talking about, and you knew he was going to explain it in a plain, simple English, and you were not going to get lost. He made you feel comfortable. And that's one of the things that to do in making you feel comfortable, he would pay attention to everybody's language. And he would pay attention to the rhetoric, the discussion, and especially discussions that got heated. And he would pay attention to ones that got excited. And he would ask questions similar to the one I asked. Now, mine was very specific because I sort of had an idea involved. But he would ask questions like, say, hey, what's your ideal X? What's your ideal products, or what's the ideal solution to your problem? He would also ask, what are some of the nightmares you've experienced trying to find that? And he would pay attention to your adjectives and your adverbs as you answered that question, but he would pay attention to the answers. And that's one of the things that he would do in the Warrior Forum. And he would also, check reviews and for other things that are on the Warrior Forum and see what people really did and did not like. And he would, if it is all possible, he would pay attention to what buyers like and do not like more than people who are non-buyers. One of the things that was a main principle of our fathers was, don't worry about the dogs when you're chasing foxes. Nice. You do not, worry about the haters and the detractors. You're worried about the core audience, the energized people that are ready to take action. Because no matter if you don't have haters, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. If you don't have haters, you're not doing something right.
Right.
And that's true. You're not reaching out. You're not getting to the right people. And, I finally got a couple and I was like, oh, wow. And it was actually the funny thing about it was I was truly kind of excited about it. I was like, I've been waiting for this. And so, go ahead and ask your question before I move on to the next topic portion.
Sure. You kind of answered it because I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about the passion. And you kind of said, not the non-buyer hate, because that's kind of like the Warrior Forum is kind of known for, is the non-buyer hate or the $7 buyer hate. So can you explain a little bit more about, like, as you're going through and you see the most popular threads, are you looking for what's more valuable in your opinion, or what do you think your dad would look for? The super passion, I love this, or man, I hate when I have to do this, and I hate that, and I hate this, and this is the worst thing I've ever had to deal with, blah, blah, blah.
Well, they would both make it into the copy in a way. So, for example, Kevin was explaining how we did this in recently, which is and this is a very typical kind of trick anybody can use. Some people call it the Amazon trick, but the truth is you want to do it with Yelp too, because Yelp is for services, Amazon is for products. And so what he would do is pay attention to where everybody had their energy and how they describe products that they love. But the negative is where your products are. And that goes into the next thing we're going to talk about. I teach people all the time that good marketing is about hooks, offers, and solutions. And a lot of people don't know what I mean by solutions, but you're about to find out. A hook is, Tova Bordenine swears under an oath that her new perfume does not contain an illegal sexual stimulant. That's a hook. An offer is, I'm going to give you double your money back, or I'm going to let you in for 10 days for free, or I'm going to make a special offer that stands out. But solutions are when you're solving people's problems. Now, our father and us, we like to do the research before you even create the product. In fact, we will often write copy before the product is done. Recently, I was working on an edition of the Boron Letters that's not going to be out for a very, very, very long time. But as I was writing the copy, I get into this flow state, and I'm like, and I'm also going to add this handwritten lesson that I wrote to my kids that relates just to this version of the Boron Letters, right? Because that came out while doing the research and creating the offer itself. That became part of what made it unique. Nice. And one of the best things you can do is when somebody says, hey, I love all this, but I hate how this gets stuck, or I hate how this tip breaks. So what you do is, you get a higher grade plastic for that tip, and you say, this won't break like those cheap ones. And so the unique selling proposition and the offer itself often comes from where people have problems. Good marketers are problem solvers. They're people who don't sit there and say, this can't be done. Okay, I'll go home and forget the idea. When our father created the coat of arms, he said, I need all the names in zip code order. By their name order. And they had just moved everything to zip code order. And so he went and paid them thousands of dollars to have them change all the names in the database back just for him into name sorted order. This is long before, this is back when computers were 10 feet tall and had big reels and mag-to-mag tapes. Right. And, that constituted what's in a calculator now. But and I remember going to these rooms with Harvey Brody and stuff like that. I mean, I saw computers and direct response marketing I was a little kid and I was just in awe of all this. But anyway, so the offers and he turned around and said, I'm not taking that as an answer. I'm going to go make this happen because it's my business. And that's what great marketers do. They don't say, oh, it would be neat if they had this. They say, oh, we can figure out a way to do this. And they try and find a simple, down and dirty, very simplistic, genius way to actually provide the value and do what they want. But if they have to get more complicated, they will. So you try and shoot for simplicity, but what you're really doing is solving a lot of problems, and that's what, and that's how you do product development. Our father would go through, and after doing all the research, he would figure out what it is you really needed to know. And in this case, for me, one of the things I found out about the Warrior Forum, which I needed to know, because I never hung out on it. Before my father passed away, or even after, I just did not hang out there. It wasn't, I don't even know where I heard of it the first time. So I was there trying to figure out and gauge the level, gauge where these people needed to know where they wanted to be. And I found out that what they needed was some good basic instructions, not just the right philosophy and the right tactics, but some tactical how-to that was beginner how-to, sort of like how to start writing headlines and how to start researching your market and how to start copywriting and how to get over writer's block. They weren't ready for that. They weren't ready for the stage of, okay, this is where you take your mastermind and start pulling and offering an extra day on for private sessions. They weren't at that level. And so with that, I started taking all the research and the feedback, and I started to solve their problems. I started to put together the letters that made the most sense. I didn't just take them in order and say, here, read these 20 letters in order. And because the value, so you're going to get more bang for your buck reading letter number 1, then letter number, let's say 5, and then maybe letter number 7. Right. So it was different. It wasn't the same as, so don't think I just sent them to the Gary Halbert letter. I was actually specifically paying attention to, this was the information that proved to be the most valuable to warriors. And so we started putting those together, and the idea was to put them together for a book. And it was the book of the letters. And then we said, how can we make this better? And that's one of the things you always want to do. You let your research determine what the product is going to be. And then you ask, how can I improve it? How can I make it better? How can I do that? And we kept thinking, well, a lot of people like to consume information and listen to it on trains or in planes and so forth, or driving in the car. How about an audio series? And then we said, well, wait a minute. And I was sitting there about to start reading issues of the Gary Halbert letter to create an audio series. But I have a squeaky little girl's voice, and it dawned on us. Kevin and I were talking. We're like, why don't we get other copywriters to do this? And so we did. We got other copywriters to read these fantastic Gary Halbert letters. And then we asked them to add commentary onto it. Okay. And I guess so the thing is, what we were doing is we took the research, we were solving their problem, and we were creating a product that we knew would be of massive benefit and service to them and to everybody. We wanted to make sure that, one, it's not the information we were creating was not of use to somebody who's got a paper route. It was of use to somebody who was going into direct response marketing, not image advertising, not a copywriter trained at UCLA to put graphics on a box or any of that kind of thing. It was very specifically targeted, but in that target, we hit everybody. We're like, this applies to every single person on the Warrior Forum. And but it's still highly targeted. You're not wondering why this is being approached there. And so that's how you create products, is you look for where people are you're looking to solve problems. And in your marketing, most of the time, if you write your pitch, it's not the one that you're necessarily going to follow through with all the way, but you write your dream copy, is what Kevin and I call it, where you're saying the best thing you can say about your product, and you're making the best offer that you can possibly make, and you're writing what you want, and then you go out and you try and make it true. And we did this once with the Robert Collier letter book. We were asked to help the family publish it because they saw what we were doing with our father's legacy. And so what we did was I wrote dream copy for the description, and I said, and it includes this, this, and this, and that, which didn't exist at the time. And I went back to Joyce Collier. I said, well, this is what I wrote. Can you make any of that happen? And she says, actually, I can make that happen and better. She included not only a story, but it was a great marketing to a story that was written by by Robert Collier himself, and made that true. So the product was made better by the fact that we made the marketing first. Okay. So that's another thing that my dad did teach us to do. Okay. And then he would start looking to make it interesting. And so let's talk about that. He would test the waters too. So we had the idea, tested the waters, and said, hey, does this sound good? And people are like, man, I want it. If you can encapsulate the Gary Halbert letters in anything, I'll take it. So we knew we were onto something. So now it came time to make an offer that people couldn't refuse. Okay. And the way that we did that, do you mind me tell people the story of the very first gun to the head marketing?
Sure. Before we get into the last part, because we've been talking about market research and new product ideas.
Okay.
Can you speak to what if someone has, their first ebook? It's like a 12-page report. It's not very long, but it's really meaty. And they're already trying to sell it, and it's not doing well. What would you tell them? Get on the Warrior Forum and do blank.
I would get on the Warrior Forum and I would give them ethical bribes to not only buy, but to review that book, and to spread the word for that book. And then I would actually do a very shifty, it's not shifty. It's actually a great trick I did with the boron letters. What I did was, you get your audience to start buying your book, whatever your list is. You have 500 people, or if it's the Warrior Forum, you make posts and ask people to come check it out. If it's an inexpensive book, you're asking them to give them feedback and be a part of the process. One of the things that great marketers do is they make you part of building it, because it's, I forget what's the saying where, you don't have, if they help build it, they won't fight it. They actually become part of it. And so with what I was doing on the Warrior Forum, those people who were giving me the feedback, they're proudly and rightfully should be very proud that, hey, I was one of the reasons that this letter made it into that thing. So what I did, and this was just outside of the box thinking, what I did was I told everybody to go buy my book. And then, because I updated the boron letters, and then I told everybody to go buy John Carlton's book. And this sounds counterintuitive and it sounds insane until you realize that what I'm doing is I'm getting Google to recognize that a lot of people who buy my book like John Carlton's book, right? Right. And I did my best, and I did a whole bunch of stuff to help keep that book at #1 for a long time. Most marketers go, okay, I got #1, and they just poured out everything. And they don't, #1 is, let's say, here. And they went all the way up here, way past it, but it still just says #1, right? What I did was I wanted to go to #1, and then as long as I was past it, I didn't do anything. And then when it dropped down, hit it up with another promotion. You were part of that plan, remember?
Yep.
Okay, so I got that going. And so the reason I did that is I didn't just want a #1 bestseller. I wanted a #1 bestseller at the max effective price, which was $10. I wanted it there for a long period of time. And I wanted a lot of organic reviews, and I wanted them to keep coming in. Because if I was Amazon, the book I would want to recommend when people buy John Carlton's book are people who also bought that book and have got great reviews and everybody's happy with it. John Carlton calls me and he goes, hey man, how did you get them to send an email to the people who buy my book? I go, what do you mean? He goes, the people instead. So when you pulled up the entrepreneur's guide to get your shit together, you saw the boron letters there as well. Okay. But if they bought that and they didn't buy the boron letters, they got an email from Amazon telling them to buy it. And I thought, okay, is this a fluke? And so I wrote an email promoting 2 other classic marketing books. Okay. The Robert Collier Letter book and Scientific Advertising. And in that email, I pointed people towards free versions, but I also pointed them to the version that I liked on Amazon's Kindle. And we tied the boron letters is tied to those books. And now every time they market, they advertise, or they do anything to promote their books, or that book is just, somebody at a big Dan Kennedy conference says, hey, go buy this book. They look it up. They see the boron letters as well. And what people do is say, if you bundle this up, you get free shipping. So what I would use the Warrior Forum to be a part of the fight, right? Have them help, being creative and help you edit the book, because the book is editable on the fly. Just because you published it on Amazon doesn't mean that you can't update it. and I've had to fix, I had to fix the boron letters because it went out before I could even edit it. And then I would have, so I'd make them part of that fight. The other thing is, because once it's a community project, everybody wants to help it, wants it to go. They really do. And they're going to improve it and make it better. This is also, by the way, I'll create win-win-win situations. This would be better for the buyer as well, because they're going to get better material. And so I would make them, also turn them into people who are, people who would help, sort of like affiliates. Yeah. Turn them into fans that go out and get other fans as well. And you can do that in a lot of ways. First of all, one of the things that's great about the ebooks is because you can quickly turn them into something you can publish on CreateSpace. And you could put a page in there of thanking all the people that were helping you on the Warrior Forum. And who doesn't want a book with their name in it? I have books on my shelf that I wouldn't normally read, but the author has mentioned me in the book. And even just in the thank you pages. I've been mentioned in the thank you pages of sci-fi books. I've been mentioned in the thank you pages for real estate books and for business books. And it's not that they weaved a big story about it or anything, but how can I not own a copy of a book that's got my name in it? Yep. And so these are the kind of outside of the box thinking things I would do. And I don't want to go on more because I did a whole, we've done a whole webinar on how to publish a #1 bestseller on Kindle.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
The last part about that is, so you talked about getting help with the actual content of the ebook. Now, I think this would be pretty valuable. For the actual opt-in page or sales letter, why don't you talk about, what your dad would say to different types of reviews, like you asked for a critique or whatever on your sales letter opt-in page. Personally, here's a really brief story. So I've had several email marketing related products over the years, and I had one programmer working with me for over 5 of those projects. And my biggest email marketing course that I did, he was working on, and I'd always ask, hey, what do you think the sales letter? And he always says, good, just like good, great, it looks fine. But this last one, he's like, man, I need to, learn about email marketing. I want to build a list. I want to do this. So why don't you talk about what your dad would say and what type of reviews he'd like to get for his sales letters?
There is only one review that counts, and that review is, where can I buy it? Everything else does not matter. When our father was starting out, he would go down to Mike's Bar, which was his local hangout with regular people. And that's if he was selling something that was, let's say, that would be applicable to a large number of people for diet, heraldry, right, whatever it was, commemorative coins and so forth. And he would go down there and he would read the ad to them. And if they like, oh, that's well written, Gary. Oh, you got a good way with words. Throw it away. As soon as they said, okay, I want to buy that, he knew he was on to something. In fact, I like to tell the story once in a while. Eric is a guy that I grew up with. He was a list broker, a top list broker, right, good friend of my father's. My father would go to him all the time, and because Eric was terrible at his reviews, and if he liked the ad, my dad threw it away, and he would only test it and run it if Eric thought it sucked. But you know what? There is something in that consistency. I remember playing with the stock market one time when I was younger, trying to judge by the news what would work, and I was 100% wrong. But there's money in being 100% wrong. I didn't know at the time that you could make money shorting stocks. I did not know that. But I had this system planned out. I'm like, if I could just make money off of it going the exact opposite way that I predicted, because I was 100% wrong. What I didn't know was people were taking advantage of the news in advance of what I could have. So you would just go the other way. So the thing is, what you're looking for is consistency, and then you adjust it. But yeah, he would go to the Warrior Forum, and he's not just saying, hey, I want to know what would be helpful to you. He wants to know what you would buy. What's the difference between what you do buy and what you wouldn't buy? Right. And there's nothing more like people who are proven buyers too, and recent buyers. Those are the best.
Hey, what's funny? I'm in this paid mastermind on Facebook, and it's funny. every once in a while, someone will post a sales letter swipe from your dad. And in the comments, 100% of the times, at least one or more people will go, is this product still available? I actually want to buy it.
Yeah, no, so his copy is so good. I mean, we see it, and a lot of it, it's time for us to, start rerunning some of them, because there's a life expectancy to direct response. And there's actually good money in old ads and old products, because we used to run ads in newspapers, and you'd run it a few times, and then the newspaper wasn't responsive enough to cover the ad costs. But if you waited long enough period of time for people to forget that ad and for new subscribers to come on, it was time to start rerunning. And, if you want to see some really great stuff, just think about slimming down some of the great advertisements that were ran back in the 40s and 50s. Obviously stuff that is still applicable today, but just, it can quickly and easily be adjusted. It's the same kind of thing. Like those, for example, if I wanted to do an IPO, an initial public offering for a company, and build up a startup company, I would use that, go on an adventure with me. I promise you daring and adventure and life. Remember that it was the guy's ad was to go to, he was trying to get a crew to go to the North Pole. Yeah. And it was a classic, great ad. And I was reading that, I was like, that'd be perfect for an IPO or a startup company. If you make it back alive and we make it out of this and things go off as plans, there are untold riches, Right. And he promised you promised all the young men a great adventure. And that's what you do with an IPO. And so a lot, people say what's old is new again. It's actually just sort of got a new skin on it. And I would do that.
Right. And then lastly, about the market research and new product ideas, what do you think could be some mistakes that people might do when they go to the Warrior Forum and they get a product idea that's not selling? Why is that? What did they do wrong?
Most of the time, they didn't hit the nail on the head with the prospect. They didn't understand them. The thing is, if you really, marketing's not about me selling you what I want you to buy. Market is about selling you what you want to buy. People make the mistake all the time saying, oh, your dad could have sold ice to Eskimos. And that just makes me crazy, because I'm like, you're not listening or reading the letters. He would never sell ice to Eskimos. It's hard enough to sell people what they want. He would sell heaters to Eskimos because, it is, like I said, it's hard enough to sell people what they want. Don't reinvent that wheel. Improve the wheel. What they want is a wheel that's oiled better and round. It's got a better tread. They still want a wheel. They just, you want to make a better wheel than the other one that the other guy is selling. And so I would never make the assumption, so most of the time people have their prospect or their target off. People talk about copywriting and what you have to do and to be fancy writing. Yes, I'm a pretty good writer. My dad was a great writer. But what he was a great deal offerer. That's probably not a word. But the thing is, what he would do is he understood what you wanted. Kevin tells this great story of, him. My dad came to him and said, hey, Kevin, what kind of car would you like to drive if you could have any car? And Kevin said, well, I want a Ferrari Testarossa. And my dad said, well, within reason. And he said, to be honest, I'd want a white convertible Mustang. And within a week, my dad had a white convertible Mustang. And it wasn't because my dad wanted to be impressive to his children. It's because he wanted Kevin to drive around and do all these errands for him. So he didn't say, this is, I'm going to buy this limo and make Kevin drive it because I want to be chauffeured. He offered Kevin what Kevin wanted. Okay, that's really important, because if you're creating the offer and you're creating something that people really want and truly value, your copywriting job is just telling them what it is. It's saying, hey, Big Jason, I'm really excited. I want to tell you what I've been working on. Here's the deal. And recently I blah, 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 and the story of putting it together. And this is why it's so great, and the features and the benefit. And I'm going to make you this amazing offer. And then when the offer, and you do the call to action, that's what it's all about. And it's better that you do that rough than it is for you to do it smooth. All the biggest and best campaigns were experiments where people were just trying this and trying that. And then when something stuck, they went and replicated it to see if they could, and reverse engineer it to see if they could do it again. And that's when they knew they were onto something. If you take other people's advertisement and you just create another PDF with a PLR, or something else that everybody else is doing. You're just one of everybody else. If you throw out and try 10 different experiments, one of them is probably going to work, and one of them works, and you try it again and say that really works, you're onto something new. And stuff that is new and stuff that is fresh is the stuff that sells like gangbusters or works like gangbusters. There is, so I want to really emphasize, especially for warriors, it's not about perfecting and getting the, if you're asking me which is the best font to run yet, before you're figuring out what's the best thing to sell, and you're going to test an offer. I test an offer on Facebook. I'll run a letter, but I Skype what I call Skype victims. I'll call people like you or Lawton and say, okay, let me read this to you. I did it with you with one of the versions of the boron letters, and you said, you got to reserve me a copy, because, and I'm like, okay, I knew I was onto something. I read that one letter to a few people, and I read it to 6 people and had 10 copies pre-sold.
Cool. Hey, so speaking of the boron letters, I just want to remind everybody on the call that you're actually going to give away a special Road Dog edition of the boron letters later on the Hangout. So stay tuned.
Oh, then just 1 second. I'm going to grab it and show it to you. Okay, I just wanted to point it out. This was an idea that I had. This is a classic example. Solution, benefit, and so forth. You're actually one of the inspirations for this, and I'm saying it publicly. You were one of the people that said, I take the boron letters with me wherever I go. And I love the boron letters. And I collect bags, day bags that you carry around, and satchel bags and stuff like that. And it doesn't fit in all my bags. So I decided what I wanted was as a version I could carry around with me. And my dad had what we called road dogs, and they were people who he hung out with and palled around with all the time. And they were usually a family member or a very close friend and confidant. And so I decided I was going to create a small travel size version of the boron letters I could travel around with, and I call it the Road Dog Edition. But we didn't want this to mess up with the rankings and the sales of the regular version, which is much larger with wider margins, so it's easier to take notes and highlight.
Right.
So we only, for his birthday, we like to do something special, and we printed 100 only of these, okay? Nice. And it's a smaller size version of the boron letters. And each one is numbered and stamped with the corporate seal from the Gary Halbert letter. It is literally... right here is the Gary Halbert letter seal of approval. That's it. That's physically it. And so we embossed each one, numbered them 1 through 100, and everybody just chewed and ate them up. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to give away one of them.
Nice. And guys, I see Brenda has a great question. We're going to answer that later in the call as well. So again, if you have questions, there's a checkbox in the chat field that says mark it as a question. So be sure to do that so it notifies us that you have a question. All right, cool. So Bon, we've gone through market research on the Warrior Forum, what your dad would have done, product ideas. And now let's go over gun to the head marketing. So if a warrior has like this unexpected medical bill, they broke their arm or their loved one broke their arm or something bad happened, or they just got a new baby, or the rent is due and unforeseen circumstances, they just want to throw the best birthday ever for their little kid. What would your dad do if that situation came about? How would he get that accomplished on the Warrior Forum?
Well, I'll tell you how he'd do it, but first let me tell you he'd do it no matter how much money he had. Okay, and to tell you this, I'm going to tell you the story of the very first instance that I know of the gun to the head marketing and how that came about. Our father was working on a campaign to sell people a coat of arms, their own family coat of arms. And this eventually was successful and spurred an entire industry and became one of the most widely mailed sales letters in history. It may still hold the record. But The way that he did this, one of the things that he did was he thought outside the box, because everybody at the time was telling him, you must mail bulk rate. If you don't mail bulk rate, your costs are too high. You won't be profitable. You can't make money. And they told him, you need to put teaser copy on the outside and tell them, open this immediately or you'll lose out and stuff like that, because if you didn't do that, you didn't get enough opens. And so he tried doing everything that all the gurus of his time said would do and would work, and nothing worked. And he was just, he was on the edge. It was close, but he never got profitable. So he sat down and he said, Gary, if somebody was holding a gun to your head and was going to pull the trigger unless you make the sale, what would you do differently? And I know my father, because I've heard him use the analogies before. He never says bond if they held a gun to your head. He always says bond if they held a gun to your daughter's head. So he toned that down, I know, for the public, because he wasn't going to tell everybody he was imagining it. But the gun, that imaginary gun, was actually pointed at Kevin and my you know, it was pointed at our heads. Anyway, so what he decided to do is he said, you know what, if my life depended on it, the number one thing I would do is put in a live stamp. You know, I would want it to get delivered. I want to make sure that that it got open. And then he realized that everybody was sorting their mail over a wastebasket, and they would throw things away that they didn't want. And then they had two piles. The A pile was all of their bills and letters from family and stuff they were going to open for sure. The B pile was offers and deals and other stuff that they might be interested in that was typical junk mail of the time. And the thing was, B pile mail ended up in the garbage because nobody had time for it. And when it finally piled up, somebody would come home, get frustrated, and throw it right in the garbage. So he said, I want to get into the A pile. How do I do that? And he said, this is what makes people gets me into the A pile. And so he created he wrote a simple envelope. He left an address, but no return name on it. He didn't put any teaser copy on it. He put a live, honest to goodness, first class stamp. He did not use a window envelope or any of that other stuff. And the reason was you could not open that email. Okay. And then he said, but if people open that and a bunch of flyers and stuff come out and coupons, they'll just say, oh, this is junk. So he didn't do that. He did a simple letter. And later on, when he wanted to add order forms, he put in an order form, but that order form would be in another envelope. So it didn't, he was avoiding what he called the oh yuck factor. But the important part of this lesson was the kind of thinking that says, gun to the head thinking, if I had to do it or my life depended on it, what would I do differently? And that's how you come up and make the ultimate offer. When you're writing out your offer and you're creating your offer, you're trying to make it the best that it can be. And in the case of what Kevin and I did, we created an offer that we just said, how can you make it better? How can we make it better? And we didn't stop until we had something that was worth way more than we were selling it for. And as a matter of fact, what we ended up creating, the only single complaint we've ever had about it was that it was too inexpensive. People were literally saying, you should be charging a lot more for this, and that's a great position to be in as a marketer, to say, hey, people want to pay more for what you're offering, and not just get it. And that's what they did. So the way that you do that is you're sitting there and you're writing you write it out as a draft, and you're writing your offer and outlining your offer. And you think, how can I make this better? And what else if I was the prospect, what else would I want? It is all about the prospect. You go through, I'll take copy that's really long and chop it down and improve it just by removing everything that if I was the prospect, I would be honestly bored with and move on and not care about. And I'll cut all that out. Same thing you do with offers. What you do with the offer is say, and then if I really wanted it, this is what would be. And what Kevin and I do, we write what we call dream copy, the ultimate that we could offer. And we'll get these guys and they'll come into your home and teach you personally. And then you say, okay, well, I can't get them to come into your home and teach you personally. But what I can do is put high quality audio, do a high quality audio recording, and make sure that it's like having them right in the home next to you. I'm backing it down to what I can actually look somebody in the eye and offer them with a straight face and truly deliver on and make them happy with what I've delivered on. And so you write your dream copy, and when you're doing that, you will often come with the offer. And I'll give you a great example of that. My father would be rolling over if he knew that I did this. his assistant reached out to me one time and said, hey, it's been a long time since I've been, she got married and just didn't go to work for a very long time, wanted to get back into the job market. And she said, can I get a letter of recommendation from you? And I said, sure, because I worked with her for decades. So I wrote her this letter of recommendation, and I'm making it glowing. She is now saint. I'm giving her sainthood status. And I'm writing it. And at one point I'm like, okay, if I'm writing this and I was that manager, I'd be wondering why I didn't hire her myself. Right. So what I did was I said, okay. And if you're wondering why I haven't hired her, I said, I went to where you would be asking that question. I went a line or two above that. And this is another trick, right? When you think somebody would ask that question, answer the question, and then move that answer a little bit more ahead so that they don't even have that you're the one who brought up the question or the point. And so they don't have it. And at this point, I said, if she was still in the same state that I was, I would hire her in a heartbeat. And I will make anybody who does hire her this offer. If you hire her for 1 week and it does not work out, I'll give you $100 out of my own pocket. Okay. And so I was making literally an offer to the people who were hiring her, an offer of proof that they were getting one of the best assistants they could. Now, I would not have offered that. I would stand by that offer. If anybody hires her for a week and does not get along with her, I'll pay them $100 because she deserves to be with somebody that appreciates her. She's that good. Nice. So, she does provide the better quality of the product, the easier it is to sing the praises. But the way that I got that done was thinking, if the gun was to my head, unless she got the job, this is what I would write. Okay. And this is what I would offer to it. And actually I got a note back somewhere here on my messy desk. It's a thank you note from her. And the first thing it said was, I'm back at work, and it's thanks to you and your incredible letter of recommendation. The manager that hired me said she was tempted to hire me without even seeing me, just based on the letter that you wrote. She only made me see her as a matter of formality because the letter was that good. Nice. And the letter wouldn't have been that good unless I did gun to the head. Hey, what is it that would make this too incredible to turn down? And what Kevin and I came up with, should I mention that?
Yeah.
Okay. What we did was we took those letters, we had them, actually, let me tell you the story of how it came about because it was kind of cool. So I had the idea that we're going to put together the best of the Gary Halbert series. And then Kevin and I were like, okay, we're going to try and get other people to read this. So I looked through my little phone book, Rolodex of cards and stuff, and said, okay, what's a great name of somebody that I can get to start this project on? And I saw Joe Sugarman. And I'm like, okay, he probably won't answer the phone or anything, but we'll see. Miles will start with the best. So he picks up the phone right away. It's not even his secretary or anything. He goes, hey, Bond, how's it going? I go, hey, Joe. And I told him what it was about. He said, sure, send it over. And here's another marketing lesson. What I did was I took an envelope and it was a FedEx envelope, and I put fresh batteries into a recorder. I put the letter. I ran through reading the letter myself several times to figure out what the problems were going to be. And then I put an simple instruction letter that said, don't forget to get into a quiet place, turn off the phones, read the letter through yourself aloud twice so that you can highlight any places where it gets kind of hinky. Then press play on the record, go ahead and read it. Anytime that you have an issue or a problem or you flub a sentence, just say, stop, start again, and start rereading from the last sentence, and we'll do all the editing for you. And I included a self-addressed priority envelope, return envelope, already addressed, stamped, and ready to go. And said, all you have to do is when you're done, slip the recorder in its entirety right back into the package and leave it on your doorstep for the mailman to pick up. So this is what you do with your prospects. You make it as easy as possible to say yes. You want them to do you want to be able to say, hey, Jason, no, everything's good. If you just say yes, I'll just slip into your pocket here and take that money out and make you a very happy person and give you this incredible thing for it. And so I get the package back like in 2 days, and I'm like, oh crap, he decided he wasn't going to do this. I'm like, because this is something I imagine everybody else would sit around for a week doing and everything. I turn it on, and it's Joe Sugarman reading an issue of the Gary Halbert letter, a great issue of the Gary Halbert letter. And I'm like, no. Okay, he must have quit in the middle of this, right? And I let it go, and it plays all the way through. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to accidentally hit erase on this. And I went home, and it's a digital recorder, and I stuck it in the machine, and I started making copies so that I wouldn't lose. I probably got 10 copies on different drives and different spots on my machine just to make sure I didn't lose it. And so then I went out and started, I said, okay, I went to the next person on my list. The next person on my list actually did not return the recorder. They just had issues with their life in general. It wasn't, I had already called and asked if they could do it.
Right.
So then later on, I was like, I don't want to lose another recorder every time we do this. Now, in hindsight, it was stupid. This is another thing Gary Halbert never was. He was never penny wise and pound foolish. I should have immediately went and bought 20 recorders and not have one and sent it around. But really quickly, I noticed a lot of my friends and the colleagues were doing podcasts and stuff and had these setups and Yeti microphones and all this. So we just started making a larger list, inviting them, figuring, okay, some of them are going to drop out. And we invited them to read issues of the Gary Halbert letter. And then and all of them are saying, thank you for letting us do this. Thank you. I've been wanting a chance to honor your father and what he's done. And they started adding commentaries, and it was just way better than we could have ever expected. And we're like, this is our dream product for ourselves to consume, not just everybody else. And everybody was saying yes to it right away, and more than we thought we would, and some big players and so forth. And so we took those players, because I asked specifically, I said, Jay Abraham, can we get you to degree this? And can we get, Joe Sugarman? So I could go and say, hey, will you do this? We got Joe Sugarman and Jay Abraham on board. And so with that, it started rolling. And pretty soon we had what I consider to be the very finest product on copywriting ever. We have the very top copywriters in the world reading issues of the Gary Halbert letter and adding what they took from the letter, how it influenced their lives, and adding extra advice and stuff on top of it. So it was, because of the way that we did it, it was far better than we could have ever dreamed. And then what we did was we made the offer too good to refuse. We just made it, like I said, we just priced it at a point where everybody said, this should be priced a lot higher. What are you guys doing? And it is, in my opinion.
Can we look at it?
Go ahead. I think you have a.
Yeah, I actually loaded it. So we're actually going to give everyone on the call a special offer and coach you as well as we go through it. So let me share my screen.
And by the way, this offer was arranged through Kevin, I want to say, because I don't think I would have been this generous. And I'm not kidding. It's not everybody who knows me, that ain't hype. I was shocked that he said yes to what he did. But we're Halberts, so we stand by each other no matter what, Somebody says, yeah, Bond will show up for 4 hours. I'll be there.
All right, cool. So can you see the screen now?
Yes.
All right, cool. So just real quickly, the special offer is 3, not 1, not 2, 3 sets of the Gary Halbert audio series, plus as a bonus, the coat of arms ad breakdown that Bond and Kevin did. It's normally $97, and I kind of put Kevin's arm behind his back and forced him to do that as well.
I am stunned he did it.
What was that?
I'm stunned he did it, and we should talk about that product, because that product is worth more than that price alone, and it sells for more than that price normally.
Right. Yeah, I have it. It's awesome. But let's go through this list of people that's on here, and I think it's a good to talk about. You said, keep that in mind. Don't make prospects bend over backwards. But I think it's a good lesson for them is when you have a pretty, it didn't have to be like A+, Jedi guru, but just someone that, has a decent sized list. They want to check out your product. It's basically the same thing. You make it as easy as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first guy we got up there was Gary Benzavinga. And Gary Benzavinga is very, very special. He's special to us. He's special to the whole copywriting community. our father, I once turned to my dad. I used to always ask him, say, who was the best copywriter in the world? And when I was a little kid, it was always him. He's like, I am. He even wrote a little letter or an ads. He's like greatest copywriter who ever lived. And then what happened was over time, I would say his answer changed. And at one point I said, like the last time I'd asked him, I said, well, who's the greatest copywriter in the world? He says, well, and he said to me, if your life was in danger and your life was on the line, I would want to write the copy. He says, but nowadays everybody specializes so heavily that you have Clayton Makepeace, who's great for finance, and you have Gary Benzavinga, who's terrific in his areas, and you have John Carlton for golf, and so forth. And he said, so if your life was on the line, I would want to do the work. I would want to write the ad. But the last person in the world I would want to go up against is Gary Benzavinga. And one of the things that you'll see here is this isn't just our dream team. This is Gary Halbert's dream team. You'll see Clayton Makepeace over on the third column there. And every single person here is everybody, including Kevin and myself. They are all responsible for millions of dollars in sales. There's nobody here who's responsible for 100,000 or something like that. Everybody is responsible for millions of dollars in sales. But the dream team, the people my dad listed as in his tops are on this. Okay, it's Gary Benzavinga, John Carlton, Clayton.
Is the guy that's listed twice, is he like the most successful?
He's just his favorite. The reason I'm on there twice, just so you know, is, Kevin and I have decided that what we want to do is also, we want to make sure that we're getting a lot of the info that we want in our commentaries onto the albums. And so I'm actually in the album, but the reason for that is there is an unpublished letter that Jay Abraham read an excerpt. Now, this was a great story because Kevin was talking with Jay Abraham, and Jay Abraham would say, there was this great story I remember in one of your dad's newsletters, and Kevin found that story, and gave it to Jay to read, but it was surrounded by the rest of the letter, and the letter was unposted on the website. So we decided that we need to read the rest of the letter and add some commentary to it, and so that's one of them is me doing that. And so it's a fantastic letter. It's got a great marketing lesson in it, and it's really good. But no, and the moniker I have is that my dad gave me is I'm his favorite youngest son. Now, John Carlton there, everybody knows that I'm very close with John Carlton, so he was actually making the grade. But, when we went through this list and we started inviting what we thought would be, I started with our Rolodex, but these people we reached outside of our Rolodex. There are people on here that I'll see every once in a while and have a great rapport with at the conventions or at meetings and stuff like that and in masterminds. But like Carlene Anglade Cole, I had heard about her through several people about what a fantastic copywriter she was. So we looked at her stuff. And that's the other thing. Kevin and I you don't get in here just because you got a reputation and you're well known. We look at your copy, we look at what you're adding to the community, and so forth. And, you do have to be a Gary Halbert fan as well. Right. But so, we reached out to her and asked if she would do it. And she very graciously just said yes right away. It was very easy to work with and did it for us. She's like the queen of health and supplements and copywriting in that genre. She's worked with a lot of the greats. She studied under Clayton Makepeace, and she's just a fantastic copywriter. And so she put in, and now I always tell people, now when we first put out the first batch of letters, and by the way, I got to warn you that the letters are not all in sequence. Like I said, when we get them all done, we'll put them in sequence. But the matter is, but that it'll be forever before that happens. What we wanted to do was the most impactful, but we had to when we put their names out. When we did the first album, when we released the first one, we had to, how do you do this? We had to put them in alphabetical order because, they're just all celebrities. This is a cavalcade of marketing superstars. And I always say, well, you got into something great when it starts with Benzavinga and ends with Sugarman and Kennedy's in the middle, right? How good is that? But the list is all in alphabetical order, and it's just, it's superstar. Carlene Anglade Cole is top notch, and the quality just doesn't diminish. Scroll down a little bit.
Sure. Hey, first, let's get this contest rolling. So I think everyone should click on the link that Shane posted. Go to the special offer and find the name of the newspaper towards the bottom of the sales letter and type it in the chat. Shane, if you could go ahead and put that link in once again, or Judy. And yep. Go to the special offer that Bon and Kevin are doing for Warriors Only. You're going to get all 3 audio sets. You're going to get the Gary Halbert coat of arms ad breakdown by Kevin and Bon, the special never before seen tugboats edition of the Gary Halbert letter. So click on the link, scan the sales letter, go towards the bottom, and type in the chat the name of the newspaper. It's towards the bottom. Do it as fast as you can.
And if you're going to find out who the winner of this is, I can autograph the copies specifically to them.
For sure. I hope you autograph my copy.
What copy?
You can still ship to my P.O. box in Vegas. It'll get to me.
I'm gonna have to send it to. I want. Well, you remember the time that I had everybody? I said we're gonna throw a special webinar, but what you got to do is hold yourself up a picture of the boron letters on social media. It shot it right back up to #1. That was the best free advertising ever.
Nice.
And you see a lot of people doing it all the time since then. I'm not the inventor of that, but I see a lot of people publicly doing it. But the reason that was so great is, I knew people on Facebook. If you're into copywriting, you've got a few people on your Facebook friends that are into copywriting. So everybody who had an interest woke up one day and saw all these people holding up the boron letters with big smiles on their face because they knew that they were getting a killer webinar. And that webinar was everything I learned publishing a #1 bestseller. It was great.
Nice.
Yeah, and no, it was a lot of good fun, and that's what marketing is. You should be good fun experimenting with things. That's what we do. I mean, you were part of that process and helped me out a lot, and we were experimenting left and right, and some stuff worked great, some stuff worked okay, some stuff was so great we had to repeat it.
Definitely.
Craig Clemens. Oh my God, I see his face on there. That guy is the best copywriter you never heard of. He is, he's the guy who did what there's this pattern that what goes with copywriters, which is people learn what copywriting's about and the lifestyle they can get. And then they go and they start working and struggling to get clients, and then they work on clients, and then they get a great client, and then they're appreciated, and they kind of like are just doing their thing, making money. And then that relationship eventually ends, and they've got to go out and kind of prove themselves to everybody else. And eventually they get so sick of the routine, they want to sell their own stuff, and they want to teach copywriting, but then they want to actually use their copy to create businesses and products and make tons and tons and tons of money. That's what Craig Clemens went straight to doing.
Nice.
He made that arc so fast. And if I was selling anything to the market that was under 40, he's the guy that I would want to sell it, to hire as a copywriter to sell it. Big Jason, he knows what he's talking about with email. That's for sure.
Am I the only, quote unquote email copywriter on this series?
Yes, you are well, a lot of them do write emails. And
I mean specifically
yes.
Email copywriter.
And, well, not only that, you are the preeminent email marketing expert on that entire panel. As I explained the other day, it's what counts is the experience with experimenting with stuff. You do that all the time. Test results, knowing your numbers, and doing it in a wide variety of niches. So that's the one thing that a lot of people will bring to the table, and other people don't bring the variety, and you bring the variety, because some of the people, they're great and they're in a couple of niches, and the research is so onerous. It's so difficult, and it takes so much time that it's a lot easier to hire somebody who's already crushing it in that niche. You know,
Right.
James Schramko, and I'm just talking about the people I happen to see on the screen. I was so impressed with him. I met him in a boot camp, or one of John Carlton's seminars, and I was sitting next to him, and we were talking, and somebody got up and started speaking, and we're both mumbling under our breath the answer right before every question this person asked, because we've just been in the business a lot. But then somebody else got up and started talking about PPC, and I pulled out my pen to take notes because this was a learning phase for me. And the guy on stage was giving me all this super great info, and James was next to me whispering in my ear other great info. And I never took notes so fast in my life, because it was like listening. It's like taking notes to two people talking at once. And every time I have a blog because of him, every single piece of advice he's ever given me, I've gone out and immediately done. And that's another tip. When people give you a piece of advice or an idea, go test it immediately. Instead of trying to study and learn 500 pieces of advice, grab one, test it. If it works, it will be burned in your brain forever. If it doesn't work, you will not waste time spending an entire summer creating a Pinterest campaign, And it's not silly to try something on Pinterest. It's silly to work for a year trying to build something up before testing something on Pinterest.
Right. So let's recap the offer, Bon. They're going to get all 3 sets. Every single, marketing juggernaut is going to be included on this page. They're going to get the coat of arms ad breakdown, which is your dad's most successful sales letter, and probably, arguably, one of the best sales letters ever written. And that's normally at least minimum $97 by its own. So that's a huge deal. And guys, it's only available till Sunday. So get on that now.
But we need to tell them about that coat of arms, because that's not just a breakdown. I mean, there are people out there I've seen on YouTube breaking down stuff I've written, and I've seen people try and break down our father's stuff. And I say try, a lot of them do it very successfully, or could do it very successfully. But this is a breakdown that professional marketers at the top of the game have been missing some of the hidden psychology in until we revealed it. I'll give you a small taste of it. First of all, what the letter is a long 1-page letter that sold coat of arms and built a company that was eventually sold for, I believe it was $90 million. Now, my dad didn't own it when it was sold to that, but he's the one who created it. The whole company was built off of that letter that we're breaking down. And it got to the point, the statistics on it are incredible. And some of the statistics are in the ad copy there that we had put in. And it turned out to be one of the most widely mailed sales letters in history. And 18 months of psychology went into the making of that letter. So it wasn't just, hey, I've got this great idea and this great offer, and I wham it out and so forth. He actually went door to door, and he perfected this thing, and every single word earned its place, including the address. He went and rearranged his life and his business to match the marketing. So, for example, this is a marketing piece that's supposed to come from a Midwest average housewife, who is actually my mother. And so he wrote it in, from her voice. And then what he did, this was all supposed to, come from this kind of person. So he wanted to make sure that it would pass what I call the sniff test, that there was nothing in it that says this isn't from a West housewife. It doesn't have a window envelope, and, it's not all this fancy stuff, and the language is very plain and so forth. Well, one of the pieces of hidden psychology that nobody caught on to until we explained it was when they filled out the address, it needed to sound like a street. It couldn't be a boulevard, right? So they made sure they got an office on a street with a simple thing like Elm Street, right? And they couldn't even have a large numbered address. So they wouldn't say, I'm at 74629 Elm Street, because that sounds, that's a big street, right? A very long street.
Very long.
So what he would, and he was very particular about this, and we explained this in the part, this is part of the breakdown thing, that, even if he was from LA and he was trying to impress upon you about the music industry, he would let you know he's writing it from the Sunset Strip. So the address was not something my dad took glibly. He wasn't very light on it. But one of the things he did was he spelled out street. It says STREET instead of ST. And anybody who's working in an office or done anything, done any kind of correspondence would start immediately abbreviating that. But the reason street was written out like that is because who writes out street all the way? People who have time on their hands, your grandmother, a lady in the Midwest who's just writing a single letter to somebody, not a whole, so when you went through this letter, you thought, okay, this lady sent me a letter. You did not realize this company sent 10,000 of these letters a day. And so every little word, the street, every part of that letter has what I call like a third level hidden psychology in it. And Kevin and I go through it and we break it down line by line, and in many cases word by word. And it's one of our most popular ad breakdowns, and it's fantastic product actually.
Nice. Hey, so guys, it's only available till Sunday. All 3 audio sets plus the Gary Halbert Coat of Arms ad breakdown. And I just got a private message that we're going to reward the person who got New York Times. That's the newspaper. It's listed under Joe Sugarman towards the end of the sales letter. The person who got it first it looks like Hank. Congratulations, Hank. Shane will be private messaging you. So go ahead and give Shane your contact information, and we'll get you set up with your account. So congratulations.
All right. And Hank, do you want me to autograph this straight to you?
To Hank?
Yep. Well, some people, I think, when they grabbed them, I know a couple of people grabbed one for gifts.
maybe that's Hank's. Hank is a pseudonym, so maybe he'll tell Shane privately what his real name is.
Tell Shane what name you'd like it to, and if you don't want one, that's fine. I'll just sign it, and it's already a numbered copy.
Right. Cool.
And I saved a low number too. I think. Pretty sure.
All right. I am gonna go back.
Oh, there you go,
guys. So congrats to Hank. Hank says yes. And as far as I know, that's his real name. So
you'll love it too. I added updates in there it'll show you exactly, how each lesson can be applied today and so forth. It's fantastic, but it's nothing compared to the Gary Halbert Letter All-Star audio series. That is, I've been around in this business, like I said, since I was about 10. So that's well over 30 years. And I have never been excited about a copy product the way that I was. I got goosebumps when I started listening to these things. I took notes on them. The commentaries that these guys added has literally changed the way that I operate business in some instances, because they're either reminding me or just sharing something brand new to me. And I don't think I will ever create a product that I am more proud of than that audio series. And
I'm not surprised. One of my favorites is actually Sammy Markowitz, Lesser Brethren.
Sammy was fantastic. Sammy got an advantage though. I'll say that. Well, what happened was everybody set the bar higher and higher and higher. And so when I heard how great Kennedy's and Benzavinga's commentaries were, I'm like, okay. And now I just started putting all this extra stuff into my commentary and try, and say, because it kind of, it's like a mastermind where somebody hits you an idea and then you go, okay, got it. And then let me add this to it. It's kind of like an improv. Yes. And this and that. And Sammy heard about that. He goes, well, send me yours. So I sent him mine, which was, trying to, be the best and top these. And Sammy, he's like, okay, I'm going to top Bond. And he did an amazing job. In fact, he did such an amazing job. I was like, oh man, I kind of wish I didn't tell him all the, share with mine, right? Because he just knocked it out of the park. And Sammy is also one of the best, sharpest marketing minds that you've never heard of. He's even less well known than Craig, and just incredible.
Nice. All right, guys. So we have a couple questions here. If you have any additional questions for Bon on what we've covered already, or anything and everything about the Warrior Forum, or just marketing and copy in general, fire away. Just remember, in the chat box, there's a little check mark where you can check it and to let us know that it's a question. And then it'll come up under the question and answers for us. So first one is Brenda. Can you review, again, guys, especially James, I'm talking to you, James, if it's a question, you got to hit the check mark so it comes up under question and answers. That means we won't miss it. All right, so Brenda wants to know, and I think you covered a little bit, but how do you find out who are the proven buyers? So maybe review what you said about the Warrior Forum and finding the proven buyers, and then just in general as well.
Well, okay, you can tell who's the proven buyers because they'll have specifics about the product and the information. They'll talk about it in a way that nobody can. It's like the proof elements in copy. A lot of times that they're telling you the story, it's actually a proof element because it's hard to, a lie will say, oh, I was up on stage and I was rocking it with Bono. When you say, I met Bono in his hotel room and then he was eating, I found out he eats, actually David Bowie does this, he eats bananas and works out before the show. You start telling the details of the story. That shows you the proof of who was doing what. But in general, what you want to do is you look at the sources and you look at lists. And people usually, I've already segmented, your list of buyers should be tagged and separate from your list of people who subscribe, who are email subscribers, let's say.
Yep. And
the important thing is people who've bought, most importantly, is people who've bought recently and multiple buyers. And when we were in the, during direct response, or excuse me, direct mail, which is a portion of direct response, my very first job was working at a list brokerage company. And I worked in the card room. In the card room, what they had was this was long before everything was printable and on computers. This is before the PC. And the cards would list all the different lists that were available. This was a list brokerage that were available for rent. And it would have the name of the list, where it was generated from, how it was generated, how much they bought, how many people were on the list. And I'll tell you what my dad paid the most attention to, which was who bought, how recently. And then they called what they called the hot list. And that meant how many new subscribers a month this usually brought in, because you didn't just want a list of people who bought stuff from a year ago. You want a list of people who bought stuff now, and you want somebody who's constantly giving you, the list is growing on an ongoing basis. It's still going. And then you wanted people who bought multiple times. Okay, those were the gold. And that's another lesson for direct marketing is you go for the gold pieces first. And then if it's still profitable, you pick up the silver pieces. And if it's still profitable, you pick up the silver. So in the relationship with buyers, this is the way it would work. The gold is people who already bought from you and bought multiples from you. They love you, they're your fans, and they buy everything that you do. The second most profitable list that you can go to are people who've been buying stuff and buying it recently. And it could be from you or it could be from other people, and multi-buyers. And then there are people who just bought recently. And then there are the people who bought and didn't buy just recently. And then there are the people who expressed an interest. And if you write your marketing well enough, I'll give you the ultimate. My dad one time wrote a diet ad that was so popular and so good that when they ran it it crushed it on every single list of diet buyers. So they went out and said, okay, let's try it in newspapers. And it crushed it there. And they said, this is working to all these lists. They tried mailing it to lists of people that were not diet buyers, and it started to work. So what they did was they created this formula that would go into the public records and get driver's licenses and compare their height to their weight ratio to decide who needed to lose weight. And they would mail it to those people and it worked. Nice. That's a classic example of the marketing being so powerful. But most of the time, your marketing is value, most of the time you're shooting for, if it doesn't sell to your own list and your own hot buyers and stuff, it's not going to sell in general. That's the gold pieces you go after. And then you test it to warm and endorsed traffic. And then you test it to colder, traffic that's more cold. And you keep going until it doesn't turn a profit. Okay. So a good, that's the general rule of thumb is, that you keep going and expanding and, once something works, you roll it out. You test 10,000 names, that list works. You roll it out to the all 100,000 or 1,000,000 names in a rotation, not just dumping it all at once. You start mailing those out, and you take the profits and you start testing it on the other lists. And you keep doing that and going down until we break even, and the profit is all being made on the back end. Okay, that's the subsequent products that you're going to sell after they buy. And then eventually you get down to, this is cold traffic. It's just not profitable. And then, so you don't mail to that. Okay. And almost every time you're at a source of people, the way that you tell the buyers is for feedback and reviews, you tell them, you look for actual buyers. Like if I'm looking at Amazon reviews, they'll mark between who's an actual buyer of this book and who's just somebody, trolling the page and leaving comments. It tells you. But if you take a look at those Amazon comments, take a look at any of the warriors that you know, because if you published a book and pronounced it on the Warrior Forum, I guarantee you've got people just trolling you on that page, on the review page, and you can see who's a buyer and who's not. You'll see the difference in the way that they write. You'll see the detail level in the people who bought. They will tell you stuff about the book that they did not like that's actually real, and they couldn't have known unless they did buy the book. And so you can tell it in their tone and in their language, and especially through something like the Warrior Forum. But other places, some of them will, they just don't let you do the review unless they're buyers. And so you can take the buyers there. But when you're sourcing traffic, that's almost, especially if you're paying for the traffic and you're paying for the list or something, that's just part of the contract where how much they spent, when they spent it. You get as much detailed information as you can about their purchasing habits.
Cool. See, guys, Brenda just wanted to know, how do you find out who the proven buyers are? And once again, over deliverance.
Yeah, bucket mouth bond.
All right. So Jim wants to know, he's never marketed anything. He's bombarded with crappy emails and sales pitches. He doesn't know who to trust. Where should someone like him start? I would say the GaryHalbertLetter.com, number one, for sure.
You got to go to the Gary Halbert letter, because all the gurus you talk about, or that, if they didn't learn directly from Gary Halbert letter, they learned from somebody who was learning from the Gary Halbert letter.
Right. And,
and Paris Lampropoulos, fantastic copywriter, coined it best. He said, in the world of copywriting, all roads lead to Gary Halbert. And they do. And so you can go there and trust that. But barring that, what you want to do is trust yourself. Because the thing is this, if you've got 20 emails coming in this morning and pitches, and they're all sloppy pitches, which one actually got your attention? Which one did you click on? Which one did you open? Because if they're getting you to take action, they're getting other people to take action. One of the keys of marketing is understanding that if you're interested in it, a bunch of other people are interested in it. If you're having this problem, so are other people. You're not alone. Everybody acts like, the great thing about marketing is when you get so in tune with yourself that you understand other humans, because you admit that you have the same failures or the same failings. Hey, man, when I come in and this is in my email box, this is an email I delete because that looks like spam. Just because I wrote it doesn't mean that it doesn't look like spam to the other guy who didn't write it. Mm-hmm. And so Kevin and I do what they call the so what test. I'll go through copy. And we did a great experiment one time where we had 3 competing pieces. He and I both wrote a piece to sell something. And he wrote a long version. I wrote my version. And then he wrote I edited his version. His version that was edited and my version, and by editing, I just mean cut out. I didn't add anything to it. His actually competed with mine. They were neck and neck. I'm proud to say mine just edged it out just a little bit, but because we're brothers, we're competitive. But it proved that he had the selling points, and they weren't identical either. It proved that he was on the right track and could sell just as well as I did. The difference was I went through the long piece that he did, and I pretended I was a prospect and said, I don't care about this. I wouldn't, this doesn't affect me. This isn't exciting. This would bore me. And I just cut all that out. And everything that left was pure gold. And that's what great copywriting is. It's, the copywriting and the offer and all that's built in your head. The copy dump is where you just throw up on the page and you get all those words out. But the grease slide effect, that's getting sucked into the copy and you can't stop until you're salivating to buy the product, that's all part of the editing process. And it's about cutting out. So the more you start with, and the better material you start with, when you start chiseling it out and you're chiseled down to where if I cut one more word, it would be painful. And if I cut one more word, it would detract from this. That's when you know that you're onto, you've got something that's been polished into pure gold.
Nice. All right, guys, it's getting late. Any final questions for Bond? Fire away. And make sure you mark it off as a question in the chat box. And again, Shane, if you want to go ahead and post the special offer that Bond and Kevin are giving everyone, good till Sunday, for the Gary Halbert audio series and the Gary Halbert Coat of Arms ad breakdown. And go ahead and put in the GaryHalbertLetter.com into the chat as well. Make it easier for people.
Now, when you go there, there's a great front page that our father put up, and then you click on the bottom to go to the archives.
Yeah, if you'll really enjoy Eagle Eyes. That's the story about how Sam Markowitz became Gary's seeing eye Jew.
I actually have pictures that I don't know why he took these pictures after the aftermath of that operation. I was like, it was like hard to see my dad with these messed up eyes. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, he called me up that one day. And by the way, that's another thing that he did that was great. He ran his experiments by us. He called me up one time and he's like, hey, Sammy, he's my seeing eye Jew. And I was just like, oh, as soon as I was shaking my head, he's like, he knew he was onto something. So he wrote a letter. He wrote a letter about it.
Right. All right, here's a question from David. A lot of online offers are pages of scrolling down through lots of stuff. How can they be successful if we should really chop down to the raw offer?
Okay, there's a couple tricks to doing it in the way that I do it. Now, first of all, I'll say I've got short pieces that I know are competing with other people's long copy. And the reason is I was short, direct to the point, outlined the benefits, and I did such a good job that they didn't need a whole index of things to double check, and the more I will write will be based on, and the more detail I'll share the job is always to do enough to tell that you can, and never to be boring, you can never be too long. You can only be too boring, but people need more information. That's sometimes boring information if it takes a lot to make that decision. So if I was buying a house, I would want a book of information this thick on that house telling me the history, the plumbing, old bills, and everything. And it's not that I would necessarily want to go through it. I would want it there for my reference. And so what a lot of the great copywriters are now doing to get over that, oh my God, this is 60 pages. I can't read the whole thing. They will go back to that sales page, Jason, and you'll see what I did when they pull it up. And and there's two techniques that you can do that are great for that. One is to use very big, bold headers that go directly to that information that they want. So in that sales copy, you'll see who is Gary Halbert. So if you already know who Gary Halbert was, you scroll down to the next piece that might be of interest to you. So those headers tell you right there, who is Gary Halbert? Oh, I already know who he was, and I knew about him mailing the most widely mailed sales letter in history. So you scroll down a little more. And, say I want to know what's in the series, or I want to know this. And so those headings allow you to immediately go to the information that you need to make that buying decision. And another way that you can, the testimonials, the all-stars are over on the right, because if you need to know who they are, they're there, but they're compartmentalized. So you don't feel like you have to read that to read the rest of it. And so you can go through it, and then you can decide for yourself what's the most important information you need to decide to buy the information, or to buy that material or not. Another way that you can do it, especially on the internet, is you can have these little read more tags. And so when you hit read more, and it should never take them off the page ever. But what it can do is open up and expand that article so that if this is the part that's really grabbed their attention, they can hit read more and continue in getting more of the stuff that they need. And then but the way it'll be written is so that when you come to the end of that section and going into the next section is just as smooth. So if I need more information on who Gary Halbert was, I can click read more. But if not, I can go, it'll just as smoothly go into what's in the series or who are the all-stars and talk about them or the different features and the different stuff that's talked about in there. And so when it's online, I like to use, that expansion ability, because what you can do is, the very first thing people have to decide to do is whether or not they're going to read the copy. And they're not going to read the copy if they look at it and they start to scroll down and they see that it's 90 pages long and it's, all very difficult stuff. They can say, oh, well, I don't have time for this. But if they scroll down and see, oh, it looks pretty simple and quick, but then they get sucked into something that's so interesting and they click read more and it expands up, you can still get them to sucked into reading 60 pages of content and copy that way. As long as it's exciting, as long as it's relevant to them, and as long as it's to the point. And by to the point, there is no limit. I don't want to say cut down your 60 page to 5 page. That's not the goal. The goal was to cut it out. And Kevin created the very best phrase for this. You want to write your copy and pretend that the reader's got to pee. Imagine that they're sitting there talking to you and they got to go to the bathroom. What can you say that's so important that they'll stop for just one more second before they have to go to the bathroom? So you're saying what you've got to say, but you're saying it quickly. So if I write something that I think is a really great sales letter and it's 20 pages, it's probably started off as 40. So I'm not telling you don't write a 60-page sales letter. I'm not saying that. I'm saying after you've written your copy, you want to go down and shorten it and make it abbreviate it, get it to the point, make the language simple. Make the language so simple that your 9-year-old child can read it. When it comes to simplicity, I've been trained to do that. So I never use like the Hemingway app to go through and see how, see what level my grade level is at. Scott actually took one of my sales emails and he said, he goes, that was pretty amazing. I put it through Hemingway and you came in at 3.5 grade level. Wow. Most marketers shoot for 5 or 6. And I didn't know that. I was like, oh, I was just making it as simple as I could. And every line I'll read and say, can I say this in a simple way without losing detail and excitement? I don't mean to make this, hey, buy my stuff, it's good. Right. It doesn't get that short. But if that word isn't adding to the sentence, if that word isn't adding to the emotion or to the desire to buy, it goes. And I'll rephrase things so that so that I can make sentences shorter, or make shorter sentences and shorter paragraphs, and make it, when people read that and go, I got time to at least check out a few paragraphs here, or to check out a couple of these headers.
Nice. All right. Looks like we have one last question. Let me see here. It is by Yisrael. He says, someone who represents themselves has a fool for a lawyer. Is the same true for copywriters?
No, actually not. Some of the best copywriters are actually writing for their own products. That's where they go. However, the most expensive copywriter is a cheap copywriter. That is true. If it is your copy, if it is your product, it is your thing, that your offer, you're going to put a lot of energy and excitement into it that is hard to replicate by other people. Right. And you're not foolish for trying to write your own copy by any means. What you will be foolish for is to go out and bargain shop and say, hey, I like a lot of Gary Halbert stuff. Can you write copy along that lines and so forth? Oh, you know what? And hire somebody who's going to do a job for $400. If somebody can do that job for $400, they don't have you want their time to be a lot more valuable than that. So I think that's the big downfall. I would rather see a business owner start fumbling around and going through a copy course and starting to put together the elements on their own than see them hire a cheap one. But good copywriters are worth their weight in gold. Because remember, when they write good copy, it's not just for the ad you're writing. It's the copy that you're going to use to sell your material. So when it gets repurposed, it's part of the Amazon book that you're putting out. It's part of your brochures if you're doing that kind of localized, brick and mortar type of businesses. And it's hopefully the copy that's going to be selling your product for years to come with just minor updates and tweaks to it.
Nice. All right, guys. Thank you very much for attending. And Bond, appreciate you coming on and sharing so much, man.
Sure.
Great information.
And have a great holiday weekend, everybody. And I really appreciate people coming on right at the cusp of where I know that they're getting ready to drive out of town.
Yeah. Happy Independence Day, everybody. Yes. And again, I just put the offer in the chat. Shane's going to put it in one last time. Again, you're going to get this amazing 3-set of the Gary Halbert audio series with Gary Benzavanga, John Carlton, some of the best marketers on the planet, reading their favorite issues of the Gary Halbert letter and lessons that they've learned and what you can learn. So appreciate, Bon, you sharing about the 3 ways that Gary would turn the Warrior Form into his personal ATM, and how everybody here on the call and watching on the replay can use that as well.
I appreciate the opportunity to share it. Love sharing my dad's stuff.
Again, guys, this offer is available only this weekend. You'll be able to get the 3-set audio series after the weekend, but you will not be able to get the Gary Halbert coat of arms ad breakdown. Super valuable, $97. You're going to get it for free if you order this weekend, by this weekend.
And it's a really popular ad breakdown. I mean, really popular.
Yep. All right, guys. We will see you next week. We've got another special guest. So same time, same channel. Look out for your email, and we'll see you next week. Happy July 4th.
Bye, everybody. Have a great